In today's video, guys, I want to help you double your damage in the Hydra clan boss. We're going to go over all of the methods that can actually improve our damage in the Hydra clan boss. Plarium released some news recently that in the next patch, which should be happening Thursday, we're going to get a new sort of milestones for the Hydra clan boss, for the Hydra clash, which will give us more rewards. Welcome to the channel, everyone. I'm Skratch. This is another Raid Shadow Legends video, and if you guys enjoy the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel. It really helps a lot. Drop a comment to help with the algorithm and smash that like button. Let me just start directly with the very first thing. Gear sets. Then we're gonna go over champions and everything else. I'm gonna explain you how to build them, how to kind of like build that perfect team that will enable you to deal crazy damage. So, talking about gear sets, we have quite a few different gear sets that can actually enhance our damage. The very first gear set is actually the curse set that got a buff probably around a year ago. Time is just flying. But right now you have a chance to land a Hex debuff for 2 turns. Now this will enhance your damage. And it's nice to have a champion that will bring you a Hex out of the kit. But it's even better to have gear sets and basically free that slot and bring in a better champion that can do other things. There are a few super solid champions for the Hydra clan boss that can, of course, enhance your damage, deal damage, support your team, and bring hacks, but let's be honest, there are not that many. So when we are talking about the curse set, guys, preferably you want to use it on a AoE champion. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that the A1, the basic skill, needs to be AoE. It's fine if the A2, the A3 is AoE and is on a 3-turn cooldown. You're still going to get tons and tons of value. The whole idea with this set is that you're going to have in some heavy hitters, and once you have hacks on all of the heads, or you might not have it on all of the heads, then you want to kind of like target the Hydra heads that don't have the hacks to basically increase your damage. So you're going to get an additional 10% extra damage by having a hacks on the Hydra heads. Sometimes even more if they're decapitated. You're going to see some crazy numbers, sometimes less if they have like a shield barrier or anything like that. But it's the #1 most effective set for the Hydra clan boss that can absolutely increase your damage by a lot. And I'm talking about millions, guys. I'm not talking about 100k or anything like that. I'm talking about millions of extra damage just by simply using a curse set. The good thing about this set is that you can have the worst freaking set in the entire game and still gain value out of it. You don't need to have very specific stats or anything like that. Bad pieces will actually get the job done. This is definitely not a good piece whatsoever, but you know what? It's still going to provide us value. And you can build the champions with a bit of damage if you can, with resistance, with accuracy, or just put in a curse set in there with whatever stats and get the job done. Now, another good thing about the curse set is that you don't necessarily need to do a regular hit or anything like that. This can actually occur on weak hits as well. So if the Hydra head has a toxic cloud on and you're really trying to basically kill some of the heads, you're going to be able to land the hacks even through that toxic cloud. So this is absolutely massive. Moving over to the next set, guys, this is definitely something that is much harder to get for the majority of the people. But the more you are going to work on the future milestones, the better you're going to get at this game in terms of Hydra clan boss and damage. So, the protection set right here comes from the Hydra clan boss, and the accessories come from the Hydra clan boss as well, from the Hydra clash to be more specific, or every now and then we do encounter Deck of Fate events that will actually give us these gear sets in terms of accessories. So having a 9-piece protection set on 1, 2, 3 champions that bring in a lot of buffs can absolutely increase your damage by a huge amount, okay? So we're talking about crazy damage when you can start implementing protection sets on your builds. Personally, I still cannot make too many builds on my champions, and mainly because I'm missing one of the accessories for some of the factions that I really need, and it's just my bad luck with it, you know? But when you are able to get to 9-piece protection sets on champions that buff, you're gonna see a massive increase in damage. The next set that I want to talk about, and this is something very new, guys, is something that only a very small handful of people that got super lucky managed to actually implement on their builds, and I am talking about the new Feral set. Now, we only had 2 siege modes so far, guys, so of course we haven't got tons and tons of gear. It's a lot of RNG, but this is something kind of like for the future, right? So let's just say 4, 6, 7, 8, 9 sieges in that you manage to win, or at least to put your hand on some pieces of gear and accessories, will absolutely drastically change your performance in the Hydra clan boss. And I cannot wait to be able to build champions like Razelvark, champions like Lydia, champions like Mishinaki, champions that will absolutely increase the damage. So this set works a bit different. Allies deal 5% more damage per each debuff placed by the wearer. So if you bring in a champion that lands 3 or 4 different debuffs, guys, you're gonna get 20 or 15% more damage just from there on your team. And I'm talking about a lot of damage. So just combining this with protection, combining it with curse set, and of course combining this with the right sets for your damage dealers. So that's actually the next thing that we are going to cover. So when we are talking about damage dealers, I know early on in the very first few months, you won't be able to build champions on Savage and on the big boy sets unless you are actually purchasing those gear sets. So probably building them on Perception and different sets that will actually give you good substats and stats. Perception being one of the best sets on pretty much every single account in Raid Shadow Legends because it's free. Now, once you're done with that and you're kind of like moving into the next stage, there are a few gear sets that will enhance your damage furthermore. And of course, I will start with the most obvious ones, Slayer. Now, this set is amazing on AoE champions. Not good on champions that only have one AoE because you're going to lose a lot of damage from the other skills. But if we are talking about champions like Razelvark, champions like Oboro, champions like Marius, champions that have a lot of AoE skills, this is the absolute must-use set. Now, you do need a 9-piece set. Even if the stats and substats on your accessories are not perfect, this set should bring you more damage. Then, we do have the Merciless set, which is something that comes from the Curse series, and is something that becomes more accessible once you are past the mid-game. So, this set is much better than Savage, much better than Lethal, much better than Instinct. A lot of the people are constantly asking me, Skratch, why are you using this over a Savage? Basically, guys, this set ignores 35% of the target's defense instead of 25% or 20%. So just from this set alone, you're going to bring in a lot of extra damage. That's why it's so important to use your Chaos Ores only on important sets. So you're not going to see me using a Chaos Ore on Perception unless it's a quad roll and I'm trying to reroll it for speed. I'm not going to waste that on Relentless. I'm not going to waste that on Curse gear. I'm not going to waste that on crit damage gear or on attack gear, okay? I will use my Chaos Ores only on super important sets that are super hard to get, because that will actually increase my chance to complete a set faster. So very, very important. A 6-piece is kind of like what you're aiming for this set. To ignore the defense, to get an attack, to get a crit damage, and a chance to decrease the cooldown of your skill. Then, kind of like downgrading the sets, guys, not degrading them or downgrading them. The next best one, of course, is going to be Lethal. Now, this is very similar with the Savage set. The only reason why Lethal is as good is because it comes from the Doom Tower. It's free, you can farm it, and then you are getting 10% crit rate on top of the 25% ignore defense, which makes it much easier for us to build champions. So one thing to keep in mind with the Lethal set, always farm the Dark Fate during that rotation. If you're not able to farm that boss for whatever reason, I have plenty of different guides on how to kill that boss with simple teams that will basically allow you to farm it. The next best set is going to be Savage, and while I know that it's pretty hard to get good gear drops from the Fire Knight and just all the dungeons in general, you should definitely prioritize 50% of your energy at least on farming gear. Rest on Minotaur and other different things that you can farm. So this is pretty simple. Ignores 25% of the target's defense. Boom, a lot of damage. The next best set is the Instinct set. Now, the good thing about this set, especially if you are a spender, it comes in a Forge Pass. $20, and you are getting quite a bit of value early on, mid-game, because you're going to put your hand on a lot of gear. So that's why, if you are a spender, probably consider in looking at the Forge Pass whenever it drops, because you are getting a lot of value. So this will give you speed and ignores 20% of the enemy's defense. Speed is very, very good, of course. The rest of the sets, guys, Zeal is a good set, comes from Live Arena. It is pretty hard to kind of like get decent pieces as well. from Live Arena, but you only need 2 pieces. Crit damage and 3% more damage for every 25% HP this champion has. That can go all the way up to 12% more damage. So when you combine all of these sets, guys, and you're just basically making a puzzle, and you're just building the puzzle with all of these pieces, your damage will just absolutely blow your mind. You're gonna be surprised by how much damage you can actually get. And the next set that we have on the list, guys, is going to be Relentless. Now, this set is weaker than any of the previous sets that I just mentioned, because this will just give you a chance to basically gain an extra turn. Now, the main idea with these, guys, is you want to use this set early mid-game, when you're not able to have Savage sets, when you're not able to have Merciless, and when you're still trying to basically get a bit of extra damage. So this is great on damage dealers, like enemy max HP champions. Is great on champions that will support your team, will place debuffs, because they will have a chance to basically gain an extra turn and make another move. But once you are moving into the Kraken endgame territory, when you're trying to maximize your damage and every single turn counts, Relentless will actually cost you, because you're just wasting turns. That's when it comes in play. The next set that is actually very, very good on some of the champions, if you don't have some of the previous sets that I just mentioned, and that, of course, is Reflex. For whatever reason, I'm not seeing it. There we go. This will give you a chance to reduce the cooldown of a random skill rather than wasting turns. So this is a very, very strong set as well. But as mentioned, once you're able to bring in protection or to bring in the new set from the Siege, etc., these sets will become completely irrelevant, because the difference from the new sets to these old sets will be absolutely massive, guys. Now, the next thing that I want to talk about is the Great Hall and the priorities on the Great Hall. So we do have the Live Arena area bonuses. The very first thing you should upgrade: skip the clan boss, skip the faction wars, skip all of this crap that doesn't matter. It might seem super important early on, but it's very superficial. This is something that you can easily overcome once you are moving into the endgame and you're passing the endgame. The clan boss, yes, is very, very important, but you're going to be able to quickly upgrade your clan boss teams once you're going to summon better champions. That's pretty much all in terms of clan boss. Good champions, good damage. If you are getting some of these stats on your Demon Lord right here, I'm not saying that they won't help you, but they come at a very high cost, and the main priority should be the Hydra battle. Now, right here, the very first thing that you should start with is ignore defense. This should be the #1 thing. Then, of course, you can move over to crit damage. Then you can move over to speed. You can move over to defense, to attack, to HP, to accuracy, to resistance. All of these stats will allow you to build your champions better. Imagine if you don't need 80 accuracy. Well, instead of getting an accuracy banner, you're going to get an attack banner or a defense banner. That will increase your damage even more. So this right here, super important. The very first priority for every single one of you guys out there should be the Hydra clan boss. And once you're done with that, then you can move over to different areas that will be pretty relevant to you. Moving over to the next thing, guys, of course, we are talking about champions. So I'm not going to necessarily give you examples of what champions you should use for every single team, because it's very different for every single account out there. Every single person has different champions, and just making a team won't really help all of you. But instead, I will give you the recipe on how you can build that perfect team. So we have a few things that are really, really needed in the Hydra clan boss, just to ensure that you can do more damage and to ensure that the run will be more smooth. The very first thing, of course, let me actually go to an epic, is going to be to have block buffs, to have defense down. Have a weaken is going to be very, very important. But having block buffs will basically increase your damage, because you're not going to see the Toxic Cloud on wasting turns in there, and you're not going to be able to deal damage. They're not going to get to buff with reflect damage, ally protection, and other things that will reduce your damage or will kill your champions. So a champion like Ugo, for example, block buffs, defense down, and not just that. This champion brings a lot of other things to the table, but we're going to prioritize these things right here. You want to have them in your team. Now, there are free champions like Sun Wukong. There are other champions that will be able to partially do one of these things, right? And maybe do something else at the same time, like damage. Ugo, she's not really going to do any damage in our team. The next thing that is very, very important to have in your team is going to be a good provoker. And If we are talking about free provokers that are doing a pretty awesome job, V6. So basically, guys, is important because the Head of Decay will cleanse all of your debuffs from the Hydra heads, which will reduce your damage, because if you don't have defense down, if you don't have weaken, if you don't have block buffs or a HP burn or whatever else you might have, or decrease attack, it will really, really cost you. You're not going to be able to deal a lot of damage. Your champions might get killed as well if you don't have the decrease attack. So having a good provoke champion is mandatory in every single team. Now, next to it, having a champion that will bring, of course, decreased speed, bring you increased speed. But we're going to get to the buffs, debuffs in just a little bit. The next thing that you kind of like want to have in your team, if you are bringing in attack-based champions, you need a champion to give you increased attack. Very important to make sure that you're going to be able to buff your champions and deal more damage. So I gave an example, Sun Wukong, right? So if you are going to use a Sun Wukong, you're going to use a Mishinaki in your team. You need a champion that will give you increased attack and it will give you increased defense. Why? Because you want to increase your damage. Not just that, but that will increase your survivability as well. So Sun Wukong will deal more damage. A good champion that is free and can be used to kind of like fill this role, of course, is going to be Mitrala, plus many other things. So she will give you strength, and she will give you shield, she will give you cleanse, hacks, so you don't need a curse set anymore, or you can bring an additional curse set, and ensuring like this, you're going to ensure that you have hacks pretty much all the time on the Hydra heads. Increase defense and increase attack. So very, very solid champion that you can use in your team. But the main idea is you need to kind of like look for champions that do similar things. Maybe you're going to use two different champions. One gives you increased attack, one increased defense, but they do other things at the same time, you know, like we have Tuhanarak, for example. She's a Void Legendary, much harder to get, but overall, that's kind of like what you are aiming for. Then there is one more issue with the Hydra clan boss, and that is the Head of Torment. Now, there are a few different ways on how you can deal with that. The best and cheapest way is increase the Shamael. He was a guaranteed last week. Basically, he will remove all of the true fear and fear that will be placed on your champions, and it will give Thermometer to the lead. Now, having fear, true fear on your champions can basically make you lose your turn, and if it's true fear, making you lose the cooldown of the skill that you attempted to use. So this will cost you a lot of damage. Now, personally, I only use champions that will help me with the fear and true fear on higher difficulties where I cannot absolutely demolish the Hydra heads. If I'm going on hard difficulty and I can see that I'm killing the Hydra heads pretty fast, I'll be like, well, I don't need to bring in a champion that does this because I'm already able to kill the Hydra heads quick, and that fear will disappear once I kill the Head of Torment. Another good champion that a lot of people are sleeping on that can help you with these guys is, of course, Doom Priest. Now, with Doom Priest, you want to either build Doom Priest the fastest, either the slowest. You don't really want to have counterattack on your champions. And like this, Doom Priest will cleanse that fear from your champions. Now, if you have multiple debuffs on, it will get a bit more complicated, but passives like this are actually really, really powerful. And another champion that I want to point out quickly is not the most reliable one, but with the basic skill, it can do a very similar thing like Doom Priest does, you know, but you cannot 100% rely on this skill, to be honest with you guys. The next thing is damage dealers. How are we picking our damage dealers? So the Hydra clan boss, guys, has a massive damage reduction for AoE champions. So the problem that you will encounter in here is that if you're bringing in AoE champions that don't really shine at doing AoE damage, they're not the best in their league, you're not really gonna get a lot of damage. And that's mainly because all of the heads, most of the heads, if not all of them, I can't really remember if each one of them will have that, they will basically bring a 10% damage reduction for AoE attacks, you know. I'm trying to find them, but okay, there you go. Decreases the damage all Hydra heads take from AoE attacks by 10%. And a lot of heads do this. The Head of Suffering, if I'm not mistaken, actually has a way bigger damage reduction than that versus the AoE damage. I'm just trying to see if they are basically kind of like yeah, 30% right here. Decreases the damage all Hydra heads take from AoE attacks by 30%. So that's why, unless you have some of the best AoE damage dealers, like Razorvark, Val the Destroyer, Taras, etc., or enemy max HP nukers, try to look at single target damage dealers. And there are quite a few of them that really, really bring in a lot of damage. Quick examples, talking about epic champions. You have Phoenix. The basic skill is just crazy, a lot of damage. Then, talking about other epic champions, Alika. She will bring in a lot of single target damage. With the basic skill, with the A2, you're gonna get very, very good numbers. And there are plenty of different champions that people are just not using because they think we need AoE damage in the Hydra clan boss. You actually don't. Single target with a Hex as well will actually bring crazy, crazy damage. The next thing I want to talk about, guys, is going to be the blessings. So when we are talking about blessings, of course, you do want to have the right ones. Brimstone is dead, okay? Do not use Brimstone in the Hydra clan boss because it's the most freaking useless blessing in the game. This is one of the blessings that every single content creator, including myself, got tricked by, okay? We all thought this blessing will be wow when we heard about it at the beginning, before we actually got to playtest it. Because it sounded so freaking good on paper and we had such high expectations. But it actually sucks, okay? Especially if you are using it on any of the AoE champions. You cannot select which Hydra head will get this. It only works on active skills. Some of the Hydra heads only have one active skill that is on a 3 or a 4 turn cooldown. So you're not going to get any value whatsoever from this blessing. So the very first thing you guys should do right now is change your blessings if you are using this trash for the Hydra clan boss. The very first blessing that is the number one blessing, guys, is of course Crushing Rend. Now, this is only good if you have a 6-star on your damage dealers. You do not want this on support champions. Very powerful blessing that will ignore a lot of defense. Now, if we are talking about support slash damage dealer champion, so let's just imagine a champion like Lydia, a champion like Mitrala. You should absolutely use Cruelty on these champions. Champions like Geomancer, Cruelty is the best. Now, mainly you want to use this on champions that have a basic skill as an AoE. It's not a necessity. You can use it on different champions that have AoEs in the A2 or the A3. But this will basically decrease the defense on the targets. This will, of course, reset every time a new Hydra head spawns, but is a very impactful blessing on your support champions. Then there are two different blessings that will make an impact on the Hydra clan boss. And that's it. So right here you have Haven Cast. This will be a great blessing on champions that do not place debuffs. On champions that will actually just do damage and nothing else. And when you have a good team that will enable you to keep a few buffs on your team. A minimum of 5+ buffs. Because the damage will increase based on each buff on the damage dealer. So this, as an example, will be a good blessing on a champion like Alika. On Phoenix, we actually have a better option. It will be pretty good on champions like, let's just assume, Royal Guard without accuracy. But Royal Guard will land debuffs if you're giving him accuracy. So then the next blessing will be more relevant on him, you know. The next one, of course, is the new one from the Harmony tree, and that is Nature's Wrath. Every champion that lands debuffs and is meant to be a damage dealer should have this if you are going up to 5-star. Okay? If you have a 6-star blessing on your champion, Crushing Rend should be the main pick. But up to 5 stars, this will absolutely increase your damage by a lot, guys. So for every debuff you're landing, you're going to be able to get up to either 15%, 8% more damage. So this will be actually massive. You're going to get tons and tons of damage from here. But these are the only blessings you should use in the Hydra clan boss, guys. Now, there are a couple of different things that I want to mention. Buffs and debuffs. I know that I partially kind of like talked about them. Buffs that are very important. Increase attack, increase defense, increase speed. If you want to have a better survivability, of course, you want to have a strength and you want to have a shield. You want to have block debuffs to ensure that you're not getting decreased attack on your champions. That will, again, reduce your damage. And talking about debuffs, decreased speed will be massive because the Hydra heads will rotate less than your champions, which will enable you to deal more damage. And of course, defense down, weaken if possible. This will increase your damage by a lot. We talked about block buffs. We talked about bringing different debuffs like this. HP burn as well is nice, but it's not something that will be crazy. Curse set hacks, absolutely insane. But that was pretty much everything for today's video, guys. Hopefully you found it helpful. That's how you can actually not just double your damage, but in some cases even triple your damage. If you enjoyed the content, smash a like, subscribe to the channel. As usual, appreciate every single one of you guys watching. Much love. Till the next one, stay safe. Peace.